Really? I gotta pick it up a little bit. I'm not very tall, but just a little bit taller than she was. How's that? Better? Can you hear me? Okay, good. I'm going to just have a few remarks. First of all, it's a wonderful thing we're doing, by the way. You know, I had a good friend of mine. His name was Lance Syjon. He was an Air Force pilot. He was in my class in the Air Force Academy. And Lance got shot down in Hanoi. By the way, out of 1,300 that were shot down, there were 471 that were killed. The rest were able to pick them up. And Lance was one of those. And he, by the way, I was on what we call, keep cover while the helicopters were trying to rescue him. And he could speak until days later we couldn't get to him. He was in Carson. We couldn't get to him. And his radios went down. Well, somehow he made it and crawled for 47 days. And then he was captured. He actually found a way to sneak out in the middle of the night. But then they captured him and brought him to Hanoi. And they put him in a place next to a good friend of mine who's also an Air Force Academy graduate, Guy Brewers was his name. And Guy tells the story about him, and they brought him in there, and he was just a mess. I couldn't recognize him. He was so small at the time. He's a big football player at the Air Force Academy in those days. But anyway, he brought him in there, and then they took him out finally because he couldn't hold his bowels or anything, and he passed away. But you can imagine what he did from that day forward. And even today on the Air Force Academy, we have a memorial to his pulling out what he did, what he tried to do to stay alive, and to be one of us. He's a military man. Lance Syjon. What a wonderful man. And we have, like you have done here, we have a statue of him on the Air Force Academy grounds of him. And it's just an unbelievable experience when we went out there to place that spirit. So I honor all of you for doing what you're doing today. It's so very important. And it just reminded me of that story about Lance and what he put up with for so many days. So anyway, I want to spend a lot of time, but I just thought I'd make that point clear if we could and understand how important it is to remember those who have fought. In fact, when I was a POW, I'll say one more thing. When I was as a POW, they took me to, finally, a wash house, they call it. And one of the things they did is they had a guy named Joe Kretner who yelled down this common drain. He was at one end of the 7-stall thing, and I was at the other. The first time I had a chance to move the blood and grime off of for about 30 days. And he yelled down the drain and said, "Hey, new guy, tab code, 5 rows, 5 columns. The C and the K are the same." Well, I mean, we were isolated for so many years. You can imagine Sam Johnson, 8 years in solitary confinement. And I was only there for 5 years and 2 months, 1,882 days. But I had a chance to communicate. This guy yelled down his tab code, 5 rows, 5 columns, to see what they were saying, because we only had 25 letters. But we found so many ways to use that to communicate, which was so important. Just absolutely so important. We would have made it. We had a hand code, Wayne. We had to make sure that we kept in charge of our senior officers who were not only in solitary confinement, they were isolated, totally isolated. So it was a pretty tough go for us. And those who passed, like I say, we really, really honor those gentlemen. It was an unbelievable experience. But with that, I think I'll close right now because I just wanted you to know how important it really is for what you've done here today. And I'm so thrilled that I was asked to be here to be a part of this. And I thank you very much. so much.